The small silver scar on the back of her hand is the first thing I look for every morning of my life. It is no longer than a barleycorn, pale as frost against her skin, and she has stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. But I notice. I lift her hand while she still sleeps, and I set my thumb over that thin white line, and I remember that I am alive because of it, that a king was dying face down in the snow, and a woman the whole of my kingdom had thrown away opened her cold hands and gave me back the world. She does not know even now how often I do this. She thinks I am a sound sleeper. Let her think it. A man is allowed a few secrets from the woman who owns him entirely, and this is mine. That every dawn I hold the small scar where her blood first met mine, and I thank whatever moon watches over the north that she did not walk past me. But I am ahead of the story. Let me go back to the cold. I had left my own hall in secret 3 nights before, the way I had done since I was young enough to slip a guard. A king hears only what men choose to tell him. They stand in his hall with their hands folded and their eyes lowered, and they say the harvest is good, the borders are quiet, the people are content, and all the while the north is burning, and no one will be the one to carry the flame to the throne. So I learned early to go and see for myself. Not as Varin, king of Norrell, in a fur mantle with 40 spears at my back. As a wolf, a great gray wolf with no crown and no name, loping the tree lines and the frozen shores where my crown could not follow, seeing my kingdom as it truly was when it did not know its king was watching. It is the oldest freedom I have and the oldest danger. In the shape of a wolf, a king is only a wolf. No one bows, no one lies, and no one, if it comes to it, hesitates to put a spear in you. That winter the north had been bleeding. Villages along Lake Severn sent word to Thornhall of raiders in the dark, barns burned, stock driven off, a family gone in the night with only the door hanging open. My war captain Sarn brought me these reports himself, his broad face grave, his counsel always the same. Send men, send him. Let him ride out and put the raiders down. And every time I said yes, the raids grew worse, not better, and the men Sarn led came home with tails and no bodies, and the villages grew quieter and more afraid. A wiser king would have seen it sooner, but Sarn had been my father's captain before he was mine. He had carried me on his shoulders when I was a pup. When a man has stood at your back your whole life, you do not easily turn and look at him and wonder what his hands are doing behind you. So I went to see for myself. I told my steward I would be closeted with the border maps and was not to be disturbed, and I went out through the old kennel run where the hounds knew my scent and would not cry out, and I shed the shape of a man between one pine and the next, and I ran north along the ice. For 2 nights I found nothing but the cold. Then, on the 3rd, near the burned shell of a steading above Eldmere, I found a track that stopped my heart in my chest. The raiders had left prints in the fresh snow. Boot prints. Good boots, deep-heeled, the kind a common outlaw does not own, the kind cut in the workshops of my own capital and issued to men who served the crown. And among the boots, laid over a broken fence where the raiders had rested, someone had left a torn strip of cloth. I knew the weave. I knew the dye. It was the gray and black of the household guard of Thornhall, my guard, my men. The raids on my own villages were being led by my own soldiers. I stood over that torn cloth with the wind cutting through my fur, and the cold in me was suddenly nothing to the cold of understanding. Someone in my hall was burning my north to make me afraid, to make the villages cry out for a strong hand, a captain, a protector, someone who would ride out and be seen to save them, someone the people would love and the crown would come to lean on until the crown itself was scarcely needed. I did not have to guess whose face. I had heard him counsel it in my own throne room. Send men, send me, let me put it down. I should have gone home that hour. I should have run for Thornhall and shed my wolf's shape and stood in my hall as their king and had Sarn dragged before me. But I was angry, and anger makes even a king a fool. I wanted proof I could put in a man's face. I followed the boot prints deeper into the pines, north and east, away from Eldmere, up toward the high ravine where the river fed the lake, and I followed them straight into the place they had chosen for me. They had set a picket in the rocks above the ravine. I never scented them. The wind was in my face, and they had smeared themselves with pitch and cold ash to kill their smell, the trick of men who did not want a wolf to find them. The first I knew of it was the crossbow bolt that took me high in the shoulder and spun me off my feet. I have been wounded before. A king who leads his own wars carries the marks of it. But there is a particular horror to being struck by something you did not see, in a body that has always been faster than any blade, and to feel that speed fail. I rolled up snarling, and the second bolt caught me in the flank, and then they came down out of the rocks with spears, 4 of them, 5, their faces wrapped, and I knew the boots even as they closed on me. I fought. I put one of them in the snow, and he did not get up. But there were too many, and I was already bleeding, and the ravine was steep, and the ice below it was thin. And when the last spear went into me, driven up under the ribs by a man who leaned his whole weight on it, my legs went out and I fell. I fell off the lip of the ravine, down through the birch scrub, and I struck the frozen river hard enough to crack it, and the crack ran out beneath me in a black web, and I lay there with a spear standing up out of my side and my blood spreading pink across the ice, and heard, very far above me, a man's voice say, "Leave him. He's finished. The cold will take the rest." They did not even come down to be sure. That was Sarn's men to the last, thorough with the villages, careless with the king. They believed the wolf they had killed was some great beast of the deep woods, nothing more. They did not know they had put a spear in the throne of Norrell and left it to die on the ice of Lake Severn. And they were right about the cold. It came for me fast. The pain of the spear dimmed under it, which frightened me more than the pain had, because I knew what it meant. My blood was going out of me and the ice was drinking it. I could no longer feel my legs. The black water breathed up through the cracked ice at my belly. Above me the pines turned and turned against a sky the color of old iron, and I thought, with the strange clear calm that comes at the end, that no one would ever know. My steward thought me at my maps. My council would search my chambers and find them empty. They would never think to look for their king in the shape of a dying wolf on the river ice, and the man who had killed me would stand in my hall and grieve me most loudly of all. That is where I was, that far gone, that near the end, when I heard footsteps on the snow, and a voice that stopped even the cold. "Oh," it said, soft, stricken, not afraid. "Oh, you poor thing, what have they done to you?" I could not lift my head. I could only roll one eye up, and I saw her. She was small against the gray day, wrapped in a woodswoman's old cloak with a bundle of snared hairs across her back and a hand axe at her belt, and she had stopped at the edge of the ice with one foot still on the bank, looking down at me, at a wolf the size of a pony, a killing beast with a spear in its side, still snapping weakly at the air, and where any sane soul would have backed away and thanked the moon it was not them, she came down onto the ice. I want you to understand what that was. She did not know me. She could not have known me. There was nothing of a man about me, only a wounded animal that could still, even dying, take her hand off at the wrist. Every hard lesson of the North told her to leave the beast to die and go home to her fire. And she came out onto ice she could hear cracking, tore jaws that could kill her, because she could not bear the suffering of a thing that suffered. I have ruled men my whole life, and I have rarely seen courage that pure, and never once seen it spent on nothing but mercy. "Easy," she said, and knelt just out of reach. Her voice was low and even, the voice you use on a spooked horse. "Easy, I'm not going to hurt you." I know it doesn't look that way. She had a small, kind face gone red at the cheeks with cold, and gray-green eyes, and dark hair escaping its plait, and she looked at the spear standing out of me, and her mouth went tight and pale. "That has to come out," she said, as if to herself. "It has to come out now, or the cold and the bleed together will finish you before I can carry you anywhere." I growled. I could not help it. She was reaching for the thing buried in my body, and every nerve I had left screamed at her to keep her hands away. She did not flinch. "I know," she said. "I know it hurts, but you have to let me." You have to trust me, and I have no way to ask you but this." And she pulled off her mittens with her teeth, and she laid one bare hand flat on my neck, in the fur, warm as a hearthstone against my freezing skin, and where her palm pressed, something happened in me that I have no plain words for. I have carried the wolf my whole life. I know its every mood, and I felt the wolf which was dying go quiet under her hand, not the stillness of death, but the stillness of a thing that has been waiting a long time and has finally been found. Where her hand was, the cold went out of me. It was not warmth exactly. It was more as if something long frozen in the deep ground of me had felt the first true thaw and had put down a root toward it. A root driven so deep and so sudden that I understood, even as the black edges closed on my sight, that if I lived I would never be free of it again and would never want to be. I did not know then what she was to me. I only knew that of all the hands in all the world, hers were the ones. My whole spirit turned toward her like a plant toward a window. "There," she breathed, feeling the fight go out of me. "There, good, now I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, this is the worst part." She braced her knee against my shoulder, and she took the spear haft in both bare hands, and she pulled. I will not pretend it did not hurt. It was the worst pain of a life not short of pain. But I held still for it, I who had never held still for anything, because her hand had told me to trust her, and I did. The spearhead was barbed. It tore coming out, and as it came free the barb raked across her own palm, laid it open in a bright line, and her blood welled up and fell 3 drops, 4, onto the wound it had left in me, onto the raw torn place under my ribs, and mingled there with mine. I felt it the instant it happened. The root that had gone down into the frozen ground of me caught fire and bloomed. It is the only way I can say it. Her blood met my blood in the wound her mercy had opened, and a bond older than either of us woke and knotted itself, and a mark I could not yet see burned itself gold into the back of her hand and into the palm of mine, matched, twinned, forged in the single act of a stranger saving my life. She did not see the light of it. She was staring at the spear she had pulled, at the length of my own iron dark with my own blood, and then she flung it away across the ice with a low cry of disgust, and pressed her cut hand to her mouth for one moment, and then forgot her own wound entirely and turned all of herself back to me. "All right," she said, tearing a strip from her underskirt, packing it hard against my side to slow the bleed, her cut hand smearing red across the cloth and not slowing for a heartbeat. "All right. You're not going to die on this ice. I've decided. Do you hear me, you great foolish thing? You are not going to die." And somehow, I have never fully understood how, a woman half my weight dragging a wolf the size of a small horse across cracking ice, and up a snowbank on a sledge of woven branches she made with her hands going numb. Somehow she got me off the river before it took us both. The last thing I knew was the gray day tilting, and the smell of her, snow and crushed herbs and wood smoke, and under it all something that went straight through me like a name I had always known, and her voice, fainter and fainter, saying, "Stay, stay with me, stay." I stayed, for her I stayed. I woke to warmth, and to the smell of tallow and drying herbs, and to a fire. I did not move at first. A wounded animal that wakes in a strange place lies still and learns it, and though I was a king I had a king's caution and a wolf's besides. So I lay where I had been laid, on a bed of clean straw and old blankets by a hearth, my side bound tight with linen, a wooden bowl of water within reach of my muzzle, and through half-shut eyes I took the measure of the place that had taken me in. It was one room, small and poor and scrupulously clean. A single window shuttered against the cold. Bunches of dried herbs hung from every rafter until the low ceiling was a hanging garden of them. I knew the smells, feverfew and yarrow and willow, and a dozen I did not. A workbench under the window crowded with pots, and a mortar and small careful rows of seeds laid out on cloth. A narrow cot in the corner, its blankets thin. A single chair. A shelf with more books than a woodswoman at the edge of the world had any right to own. And everywhere, in every corner, the evidence of a life spent mending. A splinted bird in a basket, a three-legged stool mended with wire, a cracked bowl riveted rather than thrown out. Nothing in that house had been given up on. I understood later that this was the whole truth of her, written in her furniture before I ever heard it in words. She did not throw broken things away. She sat with them until they mended, however long it took, whatever they had cost her. She was asleep in the single chair, upright, her chin on her chest, her cut hand wrapped in a clean rag in her lap. She had given me the bed of blankets by the fire and kept the cold chair for herself, and she had sat up in it to watch me breathe. There were shadows under her eyes like bruises. She had not slept, I would learn, for the better part of 2 days. I watched her, and the root that had gone down into me the moment she touched me tightened until it was an ache, and I understood at last fully what had happened on the ice. I had found my mate. After all the years of my counsel parading their daughters and their alliances through my hall, after all the cold weighing of one great house against another, after I had privately decided I would rather rule alone to the end of my days than be bonded to a stranger for the good of a boarder. After all of it, the moon had answered me. It had answered me in the last place I would ever have looked, in a wolfless woodswoman living alone at the edge of the world, who had saved my life not knowing I had one worth saving. And I could not tell her. I lay there, a wolf, unable to speak a word, and I looked at the woman who was my whole fate sleeping upright in a cold chair, and I could not so much as say her name, for I did not yet know it, let alone say what she was to me. It was the strangest torment of my life, to have found the one person in all the world made for me, and to be able to do nothing but thump my tail against the straw. Which is exactly what I did, and it woke her. She came out of the chair fast, the way people do who have trained themselves to wake at the smallest sound. Then she saw my eyes open and my tail moving, and her whole tired face opened like a window into morning. "You're awake," she whispered. "Oh, you're awake. I thought the second night your breathing went so thin, I thought—" She stopped herself, pressed her wrapped hand to her mouth, laughed a small, unsteady laugh at her own tears. "Look at me, weeping over a wolf. My mother would say, I never had the sense the moon gave a goose." She came and knelt by me, slowly, still careful, though her care had shifted now from the wariness of a woman near a beast to the gentleness of a nurse near a patient. She checked the binding at my side without me having to be told to lie still. I had already decided I would let this woman do anything she liked to me forever. She laid the back of her uncut hand against my nose to feel the fever, and frowned, and fetched a cool cloth. And all the while she talked to me, low and easy, the way lonely people talk to the animals that are the only ones who will listen. "There's fever in you still," she said. "That's the wound talking, we'll get it out. I've drawn worse than this out of worse than you," a crooked smile. "Though not much bigger. You're a fright, do you know that? I've lived at this forest edge 11 years and I've never seen a gray your size. You're more the size of the wolves in the old carvings at Thornhall than the ones that come to my snares." She said the name of my own hall lightly, the way you name a place you have heard of but will never go, and something turned over in my chest. "The king's own wolves," they used to say. Well, you're a long way from any king out here, aren't you? You're just a foolish beast who went and got himself speared, same as the rest of us out here at the edge of things. Same as the rest of us. She said it without bitterness, which was somehow worse than bitterness. She said it the way you name a fact of weather. Over the days that followed, and there were many, the wound was deep, and the fever came back twice, and once she sat up the whole of a black night with her hand on my neck saying, "Stay, stay," the way she had on the ice, and I stayed. Over those days I learned her, because there was no one else in her life to talk to, and so she talked to me, and a man who cannot answer learns everything. Her name was Neve. She had been born in Eldmere, the village below, to a mother who was the village herb woman before her, and a father she never knew. And she had been born, as the North says it, wolfless, one of the rare few in a pack people who reach the age of the first shift and never shift, in whom the wolf simply is not, who stay only and always human in a kingdom where to have no wolf is to be counted less than whole. I had heard the word my whole life and never once thought about what it did to the ones it was hung on. I thought about it now, lying by her fire, because she told me, not as a complaint. She was too proud for that, but in pieces, the way you let a thing out when you think only a beast is listening. They don't hate you for it exactly, she told me one evening, grinding willow bark for my pain and her own cut hand, which she tended last and least. It would almost be easier if they did. It's more that they stop seeing you. A wolfless child, a wolfless girl, the pack looks through you. You're at the feast but not of it. The young ones your age run together in the woods on the full moon and you're never asked, because what would you do? You can't run with them, you'd only slow them and remind them. And it gets into you. You start to look through yourself too. She was quiet a moment. When my mother died 4 winters back, there was no reason for me to stay in Eldmere. A wolfless herb woman with no wolf and no kin and no man is a mouth the village would rather not count. Old Bram, he speaks for the pack now the elders are gone. He came and told me, kindly enough, that the cottage at the forest edge stood empty since the last trapper died, and that a woman with my skills would be a comfort to the outlying steadings, so far from the village healer. She smiled at me, and it did not reach her eyes. That's how they say it at the edge of the world. They don't cast you out. They find you a use far enough away that they don't have to look through you anymore. I lay there and I could have torn the throat out of every elder in Eldmere. I who had let this happen, for it was my kingdom, my pack, my law that let the wolfless be looked through and moved to the margins and forgotten. She was not the exception. She was the wound of the whole North, and I had never once ridden out in my true shape to see it. Because in my true shape everyone bows and everyone lies, and I would never have been shown the woman in the cottage they had all agreed to stop seeing. But it's not so bad out here, she went on brighter, because she had seen my ears go flat and thought she had made her patient sad. I have my garden in the summer. I have the woods. Things come to me. You're not the first hurt creature to end up on my hearth, only the largest by a good deal. And the steadings do need me. There's a woman up at the high farm who'd have died bearing her third if I hadn't been near, and a child down at the ford who'd have lost a foot to rot. They don't look through me when they're frightened for someone they love. That's when I'm real to them. She shrugged and reached to smooth my ear. It's enough. A person can live on being needed. It's not the same as being wanted, but it's a near cousin, and out here you learn to be glad of cousins. It is not the same as being wanted. She said it to a wolf, into a fire, believing no one who mattered would ever hear it. And I heard it, and I swore an oath there on her hearth that I have kept every day since, that I would spend the rest of my life making certain that woman never again mistook being needed for the most she could hope for. I healed under her hands, faster than I had any right to. Later she said it was the willow and the yarrow and the good broth she spooned into me. I have always believed it was the bond, the root put down in the thawing ground of me, drawing me back toward life because life now had her in it. By the 9th day I could stand. By the 12th I could go out into the snow behind the cottage and come back, and she watched me from the door with her arms wrapped around herself, and a look on her face I did not want to understand, because I knew what it meant. It meant she was already bracing to lose me. She had mended one more broken thing, and mended things go back to the woods, and she was teaching herself in advance not to mind. And I could not stay. That was the cruelty of it. Every day I lay on her hearth was a day Sarn stood in my hall telling my council their king had vanished, a day nearer to whatever he had planned, the strong captain the frightened North would turn to. I did not know how much time I had. I only knew that the longer I lay warm and mending by the fire of the woman I loved, the closer my kingdom came to falling into the hands of the man who had put the spear in me. A king does not have the luxury of a happy convalescence. I had to go. I had to become a man again and reclaim my hall, and only then, when I was Varen again and not a nameless gray wolf, could I come back for her the way she deserved to be come back for, openly, before the whole pack, with a crown and not a bandage. But I could not tell her that. To her I would only be the wolf that healed and left, one more mended thing gone back to the trees. And I could not bear to let her think, even for the days it would take me to return, that she had been left again. So on the last night, the night I had decided I was strong enough to run for Thornhall, I did the only thing a wolf can do to say, I am not leaving you, I am coming back. I would not let her teach herself not to mind. She was asleep at last, truly asleep in the cot in the corner, worn down to it by 3 weeks of nursing me. And I rose from the hearth, and I crossed the little room, and I did what I had never in my life done for any living soul. I laid myself down on the cold floor beside her low cot, and I set my great head on the blankets beside her hand, the cut hand, the healed line of it pale now against the wool, and I stayed there through the black hours, guarding her sleep, so that whatever she woke to in the morning, she would know past all doubt that the thing she had saved had chosen, for one night at least, to guard her in return. That she was not only a nurse to me, that she had been wanted. She woke before dawn, as she always did, and found me there and went very still. And in the gray, almost dark, I felt her hand come to rest on my head between my ears, the way it had rested on my neck on the ice. And she did not say stay this time. She was too wise and too used to loss for that. What she said, so quietly I felt it more than heard it, was, you have to go back, don't you? I can feel it in you. You're mended and the woods are calling you home. Her fingers moved in my fur. It's all right. It's all right, my friend. Go on when it's light. I'm only glad I got to keep you a little while. That's more than I usually. Her voice caught, and she mastered it because she had a lifetime of mastering it. Go on. And be more careful of spears. When the first gray came to the shutter, I rose, and I looked at her one long moment, long enough that she laughed wetly and told me to stop it. I was making a fool of her. And then I went to the door, and she opened it, and I stepped out into the snow. I turned back once. She stood in the low doorway of that poor mended cottage, small and tired and about to be alone again. One hand raised, not waving, just lifted, as if to hold the moment a heartbeat longer. And I fixed her there in my mind, every line of her, and I made her a promise she could not hear. I will come back for you, not the wolf, the man. And when I do, the whole pack that looked through you will see you at last, and they will never look through you again. Then I ran for Thornhall and my throne, and the reckoning I owed a traitor. I came down out of the pines above my own capital 2 nights later, and I knew at once that I had cut it near. Thornhall stood black against the frozen lake, and there were too many fires in the yard and too many horses, and on the great doors hung a banner I did not know, not my own device, the gray wolf on white, but a new thing, a mailed fist, the mark a man chooses when he wants to promise the frightened that he is strong. Sarn had not wasted the weeks I gave him. Word had gone out that the king had ridden north against the raiders and not come back, that Norrell, leaderless and bleeding, could not be left to drift, that the war captain who had served 2 kings would hold the north safe until, the word was always until, the king's fate was known, or an heir was named, or the council in its wisdom chose. It is an old road to a stolen throne, and Sarn walked it well. He had not seized my crown. He had merely, sorrowfully, picked it up off the floor where the king so carelessly left it, and was keeping it warm. I could have walked into that hall as a wolf and torn out his throat before his guards moved. I confess I wanted to. But a king who takes back his throne by butchering a man in the dark is only another kind of Sarn, and the North would never be sure, ever after, that it had not simply traded one grasping beast for a larger one. No, he had built his lie in front of the whole pack. I would break it in front of the whole pack. So I did not go in as a wolf. I went to the old kennel run where the hounds knew me, and there in the dark and the straw I took back the shape I was born to, a naked man in the cold, shivering, the barely healed wound in his side pulling, and I found the plain guard's cloak. I kept cash there for exactly such returns, and I walked into my own hall by the servant's stair like a ghost coming home. I will not spend long on the reckoning, though I dreamed of it long enough. It is enough to say that I chose the hour. The next dusk, when Sarn held what he was pleased to call a council of the North in my own throne room, the great and the frightened of Norrell gathered to hear the strong captain tell them gravely that the time had come to speak of the succession. He stood on the step below my empty throne. He had not yet dared to sit in it. He was saving that, and he had just opened his mouth to grieve me one more useful time when I walked out of the shadow behind the throne and said, in the voice I had been given for exactly this, "Finish the sentence, Captain. Tell them what you think should be done with my crown. I should like to hear it from your own mouth." I have never seen a room go so silent so fast. I have never seen a big man's face fall so far. And I watched the understanding move across it. Not guilt. Sarn had no room in him for guilt, but calculation, the swift, ugly arithmetic of a man learning that the corpse he ordered is standing on the dais with the household guard between him and every door. He tried, of course. He was too much the soldier not to. He cried out that it was a joyous day, that the king was restored to us, that he had prayed for nothing else. And I let him get well into it, let the whole hall hear the shape of the man, before I laid on the table between us the torn strip of gray and black guard's cloth I had carried in my teeth off a burned fence above Eldmere, and the barbed spearhead I had gone back for on the ice of Severin, my own blood still dark in the grooves of it, and I told the North plainly what its captain had done. The raids run by his own men to make the villages cry out for a strong hand. The king lured north and speared in the shape of a wolf, and left to die so that a captain might grieve his way onto a throne. There were men in that hall who had lost kin to those raids. I watched their faces as they understood who had truly burned their steadings. Sarn did not surrender his throne to me that night. His own soldiers took it back from me, and put him in the deep cold cells beneath Thornhall to await the pack's justice, and it was a long time coming, and I will not trouble a gentle story with it. He never sat in my chair. He is the answer now, when a child in the North asks what happens to a man who burns his own people to make them love him. That is all the memory he earned, and it is more than he deserves. By midnight I had my hall again. My council knelt, some of them white with the relief of it, and some, I marked, a shade too pale for men who had merely feared their king dead. I would look closer at those in time. My steward wept. The banner of the mailed fist came down and burned in the yard, and the gray wolf on white went back up over my doors. I was king of Norrell again, whole and restored, the traitor in chains and the crown steady on my head. And I stood in the middle of all of it, in the warm, rich noise of a court overjoyed to have me back, and I had never in my life felt so far from where I wanted to be. Because every face in that hall bowed to me, and not one of them was hers. Because they cheered the king, and none of them knew that the king owed his living breath to a woman they had all agreed to stop seeing. A woman alone at the forest edge, who at that very hour believed she had once more mended a wild thing, and once more watched it walk away for good. I let them have their night of rejoicing. A kingdom needs to rejoice. But at the first gray of the morning I called my steward, and I told him to have the whole of the northern pack summoned to Thornhall in 3 days' time, every elder, every steading, every soul from the capital to the last cottage at the edge of the woods, old Bram of Eldmere and his elders, the high farm and the ford, and the herb woman who lived alone past the tree line, the wolfless one, her especially, I said, and I watched my steward's face do the small thing that all their faces did at the word wolfless, the tiny flinch of a man told to fetch something of no account, and I felt my jaw tighten, and I said again, more quietly, her especially. And she is to be brought with honor in a covered sledge wrapped warm, and told nothing but that her king requires her presence and is grateful for it. If she arrives cold or frightened or made to feel small in any way, the man who brought her will answer to me. Do you understand? He did not understand, but he obeyed. That is the useful thing about being a king, they need not understand. And so, 3 days later, my hall filled with the whole pack of the North, and I sat on my restored throne in my fur, and my crown with the gray wolf on white above me, and I waited for the doors to open on the only face in Norrell I wanted to see. She came in last, and she came in afraid. I saw it the moment the doors opened, saw her small and wrapped in her good oiled cloak in the great cold vault of my hall, ringed by the whole shining assembled pack, every eye turning to the strange summons of the wolfless herb woman before the throne. She had never in her life been in a room where so many people looked at her at once, and she had spent that life learning that, when the pack looked at her, it was to look through her. And now here they all were, and she did not know why, and she was bracing. I could see her bracing, for whatever fresh way the world had found to make her small. She lifted her eyes to the throne, to the king she had never seen, whose hall she had named lightly by her fire as a place she would never go, and she began to lower them again into a wolfless woman's practiced smallness. And then she stopped. She stopped, and her breath went out of her, and her gray-green eyes came back up to my face and fixed there and would not leave, because a bond, once forged, does not forget. She did not know me. I was a man, and she had nursed a wolf, and there is nothing in a king's face to name him a beast, but the root that had gone down into both of us on the ice knew its other half across a hall full of strangers, and I watched it take her the way it had taken me, the recognition running up under her ribs before her mind could catch it, a knowing with no reason, her hand rising without her leave to press against her own breastbone where something had just come suddenly, achingly alive. I rose from my throne. The hall stilled. A king does not rise for a subject, and every soul in the room knew it, and the not knowing why ran through them like cold water. I came down from the dais, down the length of the hall, past the elders of Eldmere, past old Bram, whose careful kindness had moved her to the margins, past the high farm and the ford and the whole shining pack, straight to the small frightened woman at the doors who had not yet remembered how to breathe. And I stopped before her, close enough to see the pale line of the old scar on the back of her hand, and I said, so that the whole hall could hear it, the first words I had ever been able to say to her. "You told me to be more careful of spears." I watched it break over her. I watched her hear the wolf's voice inside the man's, watched the impossible truth arrive the size of me, the gray of my eyes, the way I had come down a hall full of lords to stand before a woodswoman, the words no living soul could know but the beast she had guarded through a black night. Her hand came up over her mouth. Her eyes filled and spilled. "No," she whispered behind her fingers. "No, you can't be. It was a wolf. I pulled a spear out of a—" "You pulled a spear out of your king," I said gently, "on the ice of Lake Severin, and you carried him home on a sledge you made with your own hands, and you sat up 3 nights so he would not die, and you never once knew you were saving anything but a foolish beast." My voice was not entirely steady. I did not care who saw it. "Everything I am, everything this hall is, everything the North still has to bleed for and build, all of it is standing here because you did not walk past a dying wolf on the ice. You gave me back my life, Neve, before I even knew it was yours to give." The hall had gone from silent to something past silent. I heard, somewhere behind me, old Bram of Eldmere make a small stunned sound. I did not turn. I had eyes for one face only. "I couldn't tell you," I said lower now for her, "not as a wolf. I lay on your hearth and heard you tell the fire it was enough out here to be needed instead of wanted, and I swore I would come back and prove you wrong, but I could not say a word of it. I could only lie there and love you and wait to be a man again so I could come and do this properly." I took a breath. "So, I am doing it properly." And I turned my hand over, palm up, before the whole pack of the North, and there on my palm, gold as sunrise, was the mate mark that had burned itself into me the moment her blood met mine in the wound her mercy opened. A whorl of light like a small sun, like a root and its bloom together. The pack drew breath as one. There is no mistaking a true mate mark, and no forging one, and none of them had ever seen the like on their king who had refused every daughter they offered him. "Look at your hand, Neve," I said softly. She looked down, and the pale barleycorn scar on the back of her hand, The mark she had carried for a month and thought was only where the barb had raked her kindled. It woke and it shone, gold, the twin of mine, the answer of mine, the two halves of one bond calling across the space between us. She stared at it. She turned it in the light. And then she lifted her wet, astonished, shining eyes to me, and I saw her understand the whole of it at last. That the wolf she had saved out of nothing but mercy was her fated mate. That the king of Norrell was hers and had been hers from the moment she chose not to walk past. That she, the wolfless girl the pack had learned to look through, was written into the very blood of the man on the throne. "I don't have a wolf," she said. It came out of her in a whisper, the oldest wound, the thing they had taught her she was. "Your Majesty, Varin, I'm wolfless. I'm the one they moved to the edge. Whatever this is, you can't, a king can't." "A king," I said, "can do very little that matters in the end. He cannot make the harvest good or the winter kind. But there is one thing he can do." I raised my voice again, and I turned at last to face the pack, all of them, the elders and the lords and old Bram, every soul who had ever looked through her, and I let them see their king's face while I said it. "He can decide what his people are taught to see. And I tell you now, all of you, so that there is no man or woman in the north who does not carry it home. The moon does not measure a soul by whether it wears a wolf. It measures a soul by what it does on the ice when a broken thing is dying, and no one is watching. This woman had every reason the world gives to walk past me, and every excuse, and no wolf to make her brave. And she came out onto cracking ice and put her bare hands into a wound and gave me back my life for nothing, expecting nothing, because she could not bear a suffering thing. There is no wolf in all of Norrell worth more than that. There is no wolf in all of Norrell worth half." I turned back to her. The whole hall was weeping now, some of them. I marked old Bram of Eldmere with his hand over his face, and I did not need to punish him, because I could see he had already begun the far worse work of understanding what he had done. The woman he had moved kindly to the edge, the king's own fate he had helped to hide from itself. "You are not the wolfless girl at the forest edge," I said to Neve, and I went down. I, the king of Norrell, went down on one knee before a woodswoman in a poor oiled cloak, in front of the whole assembled pack, so that not one of them could ever again pretend they had not seen it. "You are the one the moon sent to save my life, so that I could spend it beside you. If you will have a foolish beast who got himself speared and had the great fortune to bleed onto your hands, Neve, be my Luna. Not because I am grateful, though I will be grateful to my last breath. Because you are mine, and I have been yours since the ice, and I would rather rule the north with you at the forest edge than rule all the kingdoms of the world from any throne without you." She looked down at me kneeling there, this wolfless woman who had lived on the near cousin of being wanted because she thought the true thing was not for her, and I watched 4 winters of being looked through fall away from her face, and something braver and freer come up underneath. She did not answer with the trembling gratitude I half feared. She answered like the woman who had come down onto the ice, steady and clear, and entirely her own. "You held still for me," she said, "when I pulled the spear. A beast that size dying, and you held still and let me hurt you because my hand told you to trust me." Her voice shook, but her eyes did not leave mine. "I've never in my life had anyone trust me like that. Not the village, not the elders, not no one. You did when you were a wolf and had no reason to." A tear ran down and she let it. "So yes, yes, I'll be your Luna, Varin of Norrell, not because you're a king. Because you're the foolish beast who trusted me on the ice, and I have loved you since somewhere around the second night, when I told you to stay and you stayed." I rose, and I took her cut hand, the marked hand, in mine, and I set our 2 palms together, the gold of her mark against the gold of mine, and where they met the light of the bond flared up bright enough to throw our shadows on the far wall, and the whole pack of the north saw their king and the wolfless girl bound in a light none of them could deny. And then, because a bond will out, and because the wolves of Thornhall had let no one near them in 100 years and knew their own, my gray wolves came padding through the parting crowd, the great pack beasts of the royal line, and they did not bow. That is another story and not ours. They simply came and pressed themselves against her skirts and her hands, leaning their heavy heads into the woman who smelled of the hand that had saved their king. And one old gray laid himself down across her feet the way I had laid myself across her cot, and would not be moved. And Neve laughed through her tears and sank her fingers into his ruff, and the North understood that its wolves had known her worth before any elder did. I made her my Luna before the first snow of the new year. I will not describe the feast. A woman of the North deserves her privacy on the one day the whole world is finally looking at her the way it should. I will say only that she wore no crown of my choosing, but a simple circlet she asked our smith to hammer from the barbed spearhead she had pulled out of my side, melted and beaten thin and bright, so that she might carry, she said, the proof that the worst thing the world had ever done to me was the thing that brought me to her. I have never in my life seen anything I thought more beautiful, and I have told her so on every anniversary of that day since, and she still, every time, tells me to hush. I am making a fool of her. That is nearly the whole of it. There are 2 things left to tell, and then I will let you go and get back to the reason I am awake before her, with her hand and its small scar under my thumb. The first is the law. Before that same first snow I stood in my hall, and I made it the law of all Norrell that never again would a soul born wolfless be looked through, moved to the margins, found a useful distance from the pack that could not bear to see them. I made it so that the herb craft and the mending craft and the quiet unnamed courage that live so often in the ones without a wolf would be honored in the North as highly as any warriors, and I had it written and read in every village from Thornhall to the last steading, and I sent Neve herself, when she was willing, to see it done, my Luna, the wolfless girl, arriving now in the covered sledge with honor, to sit with the ones at the edge and tell them, in a voice they would believe because it was one of their own, that the king had learned to see them, and so, in time, would everyone else. Old Bram of Eldmere wept when she came to his village as its Luna. She forgave him before he finished asking. She had a lifetime's practice, she told me later, at being the one who forgives. It was only the being forgiven she had never learned, and I have made it my work to teach her. The second is a thing I have never told her, and never will, and am telling only you. Every year on the night of the first true snow, the anniversary of the night she found me, I slip out of our warm chamber while she sleeps, as I did in the days before I was ever a king, out through the old kennel run where the hounds know me, and I take back the shape of the gray wolf on the ice. And I run north, alone, along the frozen shore of Lake Severn, to the cottage at the forest edge that we keep now for no reason but this. And I lie down outside its door in the snow, a great gray wolf with no crown and no name, the way I lay that last night across her cot, and I keep watch until dawn over the empty house where a stranger's mercy saved a dying king. It is my one wordless prayer of thanks, paid in the only shape I can pay it, to whatever watched over the North the night it sent her out onto the ice. And then, before the gray comes to the shutter, I run home, and I slip back into our bed, and I take her hand, and I find the small silver scar with my thumb. She thinks I am a sound sleeper. Let her think it. She saved my life not knowing it was a life worth saving, and asked for nothing, and would have gone on to the end of her days believing that being needed was the most the world would give her. I get to spend that life proving her wrong, one held hand at a time, one dawn at a time, for as long as the moon allows. She is stirring now. Her fingers curl around mine, and she makes the small sound she makes on the edge of waking, and in a moment she will open her gray-green eyes and find me already looking at her, and tell me to stop it. I am making a fool of her. I will not stop it. I stopped being a fool the night I stopped being able to walk away from her, which is to say, I never was a fool at all, only a wolf on the ice, waiting for the one pair of hands in all the world that would not pass me by.